And now to our final story. You know how they say that sometimes meeting the right person can change your life? Well, Jordan Aksani thought he had met that person. Her name was Elizabeth Gallagher. They fell in love and were on the verge of taking a romantic trip together. They were going to travel around the world. They would spend Christmas Day in Vienna, and then they were visiting 8 countries in 3 weeks. It was going to be the trip of a lifetime. But shortly before the trip was due to take place, the couple split up. Although Jordan had lost the love of his life, he wasn't planning on missing out on the trip as well. So he decided to go with someone else. The only problem was that he couldn't change the name on the tickets. So he started a search on social media for another Elizabeth Gallagher. But that wasn't the only requirement. He also wanted to share the ticket with someone who would not otherwise be able to afford the trip. And in the end, he found the perfect partner, Elizabeth Quinn Gallagher, a 23-year-old student. As they were on the point of starting their trip, a hotel chain got in touch and offered them 2 free hotel rooms at each of their destinations. It really was a dream come true.
Last week, I took part in an interesting experiment and thought that maybe you'd like to hear about it. I got involved through one of my psychology lecturers. She explained that her team was looking at the factors involved in forming first impressions and was looking for volunteers. Well, I was intrigued as that's the topic of my major assignment this semester. And I had some free time as I just finished an essay, so I signed up. The experiment was simple. Basically, we had to sit in front of a computer and watch a slideshow. The slide showed photos of people's faces accompanied by information about the person. For example, that they'd been convicted of a minor crime or that they frequently did charity work. We had to study the photos for a couple of minutes and then try to recall them. I found this easy as I'm good at remembering faces. We were then told to come back 3 days later. I chatted about the experiment with a friend, and we both wondered what the next step would be. I figured it would include some kind of memory test. My friend thought that maybe we'd get to meet the people. So, 3 days later, back we went and sat at the same computers, and we were asked to look at the same faces. I'd been right after all. This time, we were told to tick a box each time, stating whether we thought the person looked trustworthy or not. It was actually very challenging, and I felt quite stressed as the participants in my group only saw each photo for less than a second. I was exhausted by the end and not at all confident that I'd given the right answers. Meanwhile, my friend, who had been put in a different group, had also been doing the test, but her experience had differed from mine. Even though the collection of photos was the same, the participants in her group had been given much longer to look at the faces, remember the facts about them, and use that information to make decisions. And of course, we understood, as we talked about it later, that that was the crux of the experiment. The length of time the different groups of participants had to form their impressions, not actually the impressions themselves. Once the experiment was over, the team explained the background to the test. They described how originally they'd asked an earlier group of volunteers to look at the photos and rate the people as trustworthy or untrustworthy based on their faces and expressions. The team had then added made-up personal information to each photo. Sometimes the information coincided with the physical impression described by the original group of volunteers. For example, a person with a trustworthy face might be described as being an upstanding citizen, but sometimes it didn't, and a trustworthy face was labeled as having a criminal record. This really surprised me, as I had assumed the personal information was genuine when asked to read it. The team conducting the experiment then explained that the volunteers in my friend's group, who'd been given longer the second time they viewed the photos, had generally matched the faces to the categories based on the facts they could recall and not the people's appearance. Those of us who had only had a split second for a second viewing judged according to appearances, even if the information we'd managed to remember in that short time contradicted our judgments. I found that pretty worrying, actually. I mean, the experiment seems to confirm that when we see someone for the first time, in that first split second, Our minds are already judging them, not on facts, but on a simple gut reaction. That bothers me, being judged in that way. Doesn't it bother you?
What is that? A quiz?
Yeah, kind of. In class, we were talking about first impressions and how sometimes they can be right and how much you can tell just from looking at a picture. Would you like to have a go? It's kind of fun.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Judging from appearances. And first impressions can often be wrong. But okay, why not? So what do I need to do?
First, you need to look at this photo and say what you think about the person in it.
Well, she looks a bit of a mystery. I mean, kind of aloof and distant. Not really the free and easy type. I can't really see much of her because of the low light, but I can just make out her facial expression. At first glance, I thought she looked a bit pensive and melancholic, or even as if she might be angry or upset. But on closer inspection, I'd say although she looks introspective and thoughtful at the same time, she seems happy. Or maybe content is the right word. Judging by the sunset, I'd say she's at the end of a long, relaxing walk on the beach. It's not really her facial expression that makes me think she's content. It's something to do with the setting and the way she seems to be lost in herself. Like she's got all the time in the world and is deep in thought. But then again, I could be wrong about all of that. I mean, it isn't a very natural shot. It's hard to say, but it almost seems a bit staged. I mean, she's posing, isn't she? And there's something about the angle, as if the photographer wanted to get the lighting just right.
Okay, now you have to read the 3 profiles and see if you can guess which one she is.
Sometimes we try to stop ourselves, but we just can't control the urge. We get ourselves involved in a verbal conflict that is often met with an immediate sense of regret. But arguing, is it really such a bad thing? Philosopher Daniel H. Cohen says that there are 3 kinds of argument. There's the argument as proof, the argument as presentation, and there's the argument as war. Now, the first of these are scientific arguments designed to prove a theory is either correct or incorrect. They involve experimentation, investigation, and the formation of hypotheses, the search for the objective truth. The second of these are those types of argument that are purely for the sake of it, performed in front of a captive audience like a kind of spectator sport. They often involve playing devil's advocate in order to force debate, and there's often very little outcome other than the thrill of being involved in the act and entertaining onlookers with witty comebacks. But it is the last of these which is the most prevalent, the argument as war, the adversarial taking on of an opponent who has a different opinion. Now, the fact that we have so many different terms to describe the phenomenon gives us a clue as to how much a part of our lives it actually is. Whether it be a quarrel, a squabble, a wrangle, or a dispute, plenty of the people we interact with on a daily basis are going to think differently to ourselves, and it is, therefore, an inevitable fact that with some of these people, conflict will ensue. Interestingly, however, scientists have proven that people who argue with those close to them are more likely to be more considerate to others confronted during the day. That means they're less likely to be the instigators of road rage, push people out of the way in the street, or fight for that last seat on the train. Another positive knock-on effect of arguments is that people who regularly get involved in them are known to have a longer life expectancy than those that tend to bite their lip and bottle their true feelings up. These latter types are much more likely to explode at some point in the future, rather like a time bomb ticking inexorably towards an explosion of epic proportions. And there's more good news. Arguing is actually good for your relationship. How so? Arguing equals communication, the exchange of information and views that are considered important enough to share when one feels safe enough to share them. They are an expression of honesty, of trust, of respect. If you really care about a relationship, you want to express such truths rather than simply brush them under the carpet. So as long as you keep your arguments to the point and remember to actually listen to what your partner is saying, feel free to go ahead and get it all out in the open. Whatever you do, though, make sure that you don't get involved in personal attacks. Then a good argument needn't be an act of war as much as one that will create a stronger bond and a healthier, longer life.
Hello,
Hi, Ben. Where are you?
I'm at home.
What are you doing later? I thought you might like to come out.
Oh, I can't. I've got to catch up on my work. It's starting to pile up.
What work?
I need to brush up on my French. We've got a test, remember?
But that's not till next week. You need to cook up a better excuse than that.
It's not an excuse. I've also got to read up on the Second World War for history.
Oh, lighten up. It's Friday night. Do your reading now, and then you can come out when you've finished. It won't take long.
I'm not like you. It's easy for you. You love history. You lap it up.
Well, I do like history. But listen, I've summoned up the courage to ask you out. The least you can do is say yes.
Oh, well, okay then. Give me half an hour.
How do you cope with exams, Amy?
Not very well. I try to keep things in perspective. I tell myself it's just an exam and what's the worst that could happen? But unfortunately, it doesn't calm me down. I'm a bundle of nerves on the day of the exam, and by the time the exam starts, my heart is pounding and my mind goes blank. I force myself to get a grip, but I'm sure I don't perform as well as I could because of the nerves.
How about you, Matt?
I get butterflies in my stomach before an exam. But once the exam starts, it's as if a weight has been lifted and a calm comes over me and I just get on with it. I suppose it's because I know there's nothing more I can do. The period leading up to the exam is when I'm a nervous wreck.
And you, Rob?
It depends on how confident and prepared I feel. If I know I've done the work, I'll take exams in my stride. But if I feel unprepared or out of my depth, I'll get nervous and probably make a mess of the exam.
Sally, how do you cope with exams?
It might sound weird, but I actually like exams. I think I perform well under stress. I'm not the kind of student who does all their coursework and gets consistently good marks. I tend to cram for a couple of weeks and sail through the exams. Of course, I forget everything 2 weeks later. Hi! We're here today taking a closer look at the idea of communities of practice. Groups of people who come together to share their experiences and their expertise and learn from each other. Here in front of us on the beach are a group of young people, mostly male, aged between about 15 and 25. And they're all practicing some tricking moves. Allie, can you quickly tell us what tricking is?
Yes, it's a kind of combination of acrobatics and martial arts. The kids here do it on the beach all year round. They use these big lorry tyres buried in the sand as a trampoline, and they spend hours and hours jumping off the tyres and doing tricks off them. They watch each other and discuss the moves and practice over and over. That's how they learn.
So, how long would you say these young people have been tricking?
There's no way of telling, really. The original group members may have been doing it for years, while the younger ones might have been taught more recently. Some of these really young ones could just have joined the group. See the guy in the white t-shirt? He must have been doing it for a couple of years, I'd say.
Yes, he's really good. He can do some amazing things.
The younger kids very often film the acrobatics on their mobiles.
Yes, I saw them recording one trick on their smartphones the other day. Why do they do that? I thought it must be so they could learn from the more experienced members of the group.
Well, yes, they could well be doing it so they can watch the clips afterwards and talk about the techniques. But the guy in the white t-shirt may watch the film later too. If he does, it will certainly be to help him improve his technique.
And how do you think he learned that move to start with? I mean, he can't have learned it by himself.
Who knows? He could have been part of another group and moved on to form his own tricking gang, or he may have learnt the first tricks online.
So there's a whole online community also.
Yes, that's right. The clips they're filming on their phones, most likely they post them straight to a YouTube channel. There's a huge global community out there sharing and learning together. That's an important part of the community of practice too, sharing online as well as face-to-face. A lot of trickers learn their moves online.
Wow, that must be so inspiring.
Yeah, I think it is. But the most motivating thing is just getting it right. Look, watch him.
Wow, he can't be doing that. That's amazing!
Dialogue 1.
I bought a desk for my study from this online retailer. You know, it was pretty reasonable. Not super cheap, but not that bad. And they delivered it, and it was flat pack, so I had to put it together myself.
Flat pack furniture is beyond me. I don't buy it anymore because I'm just useless at putting it together.
Yeah, well, I was pretty useless that day too. So I got the instructions out, and it was like this list of letters and numbers which were supposed to correspond to the pieces, but I found the whole thing very vague and actually more confusing than helpful. The physical pieces seemed to bear almost no resemblance to what was on the paper. Anyway, I tried to keep my composure, and I kind of managed to work out what it was they meant. I just used plain common sense.
Well done, you. I find it impossible to get to grips with those kind of manuals. They're always confusing, or there's not enough information, or they're missing a page. I mean, I've been there.
Yeah, and then I tried to improvise. I managed to find an Allen key which they didn't provide, so I had to use my initiative there. Anyway, I finally started to build this thing, got halfway through it, and got to the point where putting the whole thing together proved impossible without an extra pair of hands.
What a nightmare! I would have given up there and then.
Anyway, I was going to throw in the towel. Then I thought, I'm not going to let this defeat me. So I went for a quick walk round the block to clear my head, you know. And I happened to meet a neighbour and asked him for help.
Dialogue 2.
Have you ever consulted an online video for help with fixing something? You know, one of those how-to videos. I'm a bit wary of them. I'm not sure I trust the advice fully.
Yeah, I have used them. When I've had issues with software, anything like that, I go on these specialist sites or forums. They've got detailed advice and videos there. Like the other day, I had a problem installing an update for my computer and I went online immediately and this guy sorted out the whole problem for me in no time.
So it's professionals sponsored by tech companies. Otherwise, it seems odd to me.
Not always. It's often ordinary people who've had similar problems or people who are technical geniuses and want to share their expertise. First you type in your problem and then loads of videos pop up with people who are a lot more technical than you or me. What they say is really easy to follow because they're like tutorials that show you how to fix problems step by step. You'd think that the videos posted by experts might be too complicated or too difficult for the average person to follow, but they're not.
Right. And I guess it doesn't really matter if the videos are a bit amateurish. I mean, they're free, and you can always re-watch them if you don't get it the first time. When real experts choose to share their knowledge with everyone for free, it's really helpful.
Absolutely. It's good to know help is just a few clicks away.
Dialogue 3.
We're having some people over on Thursday evening, if you want to join us. Nothing fancy, but you'd be welcome.
Can't do Thursday, I'm afraid. Dog training classes.
Dog training? I thought you were an expert.
Well, I've had dogs for most of my life, and I always thought that I could train them myself, that I didn't need any help.
Yes, I mean, you've had loads of experience.
Well, right, but Booster is proving to be a right handful, more than I can handle. I mean, I've had problematic dogs before that would try to run away or whatever, but I was never worried they would try and attack someone. To be frank, Booster is so aggressive it scares me, especially when he meets people he doesn't know. It's a nightmare just going for a walk with him. He's totally unpredictable.
And if you can't pull him into line, that's saying something.
Well, I've tried everything, but to no avail. I've had to swallow my pride and start with a dog trainer. Not individual lessons, mind you. I was advised to enrol in a class with other dogs and their owners. And actually, it's proved very reassuring to be with others who share the same concerns as you. They all have problem dogs, so we're all in the same boat, if you know what I mean.
Well, I do, yes. And I guess if you had individual lessons, I mean, he might be obedient in class, but when you get down the park, he might start misbehaving again. This way he gets acclimatised to other people and other dogs.
Exactly. The whole experience has been very positive so far. As I said, it's good to feel part of a group who are going through the same experiences as you, to feel an affinity with them. Together, you can learn better, I think.
Well, I'm sure Booster would agree.
Yes, he probably would.
There's no doubt that homeschooling is a growing trend, and there are a lot of strong opinions about it. We talked to several people to get their views on the topic. First, we spoke to Dawn, a secondary school teacher who has studied the phenomenon in her area. So, Dawn, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I really don't think it's a practical solution for a lot of families. Take a family where both parents are working and can't afford to pay for expensive private tutors. They don't have time to dedicate to schooling their children. So for them, school is the only option. And you know, there are a lot of things that schools offer that homeschooling can't. A case in point is the question of socialisation. You know, kids getting to spend time with other kids. It's a really important aspect of school, and it often gets undervalued.
Thank you, Dawn.
My pleasure.
We also asked a homeschooler, 16-year-old Scott, what he thought about people who said that homeschooled kids don't learn how to socialise as much as other kids.
I'm sorry, but I think they're wrong. In my case, I spend a lot of time with other homeschooled kids doing projects together at each other's houses. Kids who go to school, OK, they're together in class for hours every day, but are they socialising? No. Look at my cousin Rob. He's at school from 8:30 till 4. When he gets home, he has to do his homework. That takes another couple of hours, and so he's hardly got any time to see his friends or to dedicate to the things he's really interested in.
And what are the things you're interested in? Can you give us an example?
Sure. One of the most notable examples I can think of was when I was 12. I wanted to build my own computer. I became completely obsessed with it and spent all day, every day, just finding out stuff. For instance, getting the right parts and the best prices and learning to put it all together. I was very proud of the final product, and I think it's a prime example of the kind of thing you have time to do when you're homeschooled. If I'd been going to school, well, I guess I'd have given up. You know, there just wouldn't have been enough time to pursue the project.
Thanks for speaking to us, Scott. Well, that's been our report on homeschooling. On our next edition, we'll be talking about...
Dialogue 1.
Anne! Haven't seen you for ages.
I've been on back-to-back business trips for the last few months, just drawing breath now.
Well, you've got my sympathies. I suppose it all just merges into one huge airport, and you only know where you are by looking at the name of the airport when you get off the plane. Just dull, rather you than me.
Well, you know, I find it really exhilarating. I'm in international education, so I work with schools in different countries. It arouses all my do-gooding instincts. I feel I really am making a difference to people's lives and helping them achieve to the very best of their abilities.
That must be rewarding.
It's incredibly rewarding, and I'd never get that from an office job at home. And over the years, I've established very close relationships with people from all walks of life all over the world, not to mention the huge variety of places I've seen. No, traveling as I do is amazing. When I think how all these people and places have enriched my life, I feel very fortunate.
Yes, I can see that it suits you, but I think I'll keep travel for my holidays.
Dialogue 2.
Have you thought about your gap year?
Yes, I'm seriously considering going to North and South America and travelling. These places will be so different culturally to what I can experience here, and I think I can learn from their problems.
That's a huge area you're talking about. It's like saying you can learn from Europe's problems, when Europe is actually made up of a multitude of individual countries, each with their own distinct problems.
Well, actually, a number of the issues you can see in Europe have their equivalents there. Look at migration and ethnic population mix, for example. I don't think the roots of these problems can be essentially too different, and it doesn't hurt to expose oneself to different cultures and just to admire some of the most amazing natural phenomena in the world. When else am I going to see the Grand Canyon or go up the Amazon into the rainforest?
Aha, that's what's really behind it. You just want to be a tourist. Don't you think that if all these issues exist here on your own doorstep, it's more worthwhile to stay and work for a local NGO? After all, you're not going to get that chance again either.
Dialogue 3.
So I hear that your family will be moving on again soon. How do you feel about that? You must find it disruptive.
Well, it's not unexpected. My mum's company relocates her every 3 or 4 years. The company guidelines actually recommend that children go to boarding school for exactly that reason, not to disrupt their lives. I count myself lucky, though, that my parents have kept me with them.
I bet. Surely modern education systems can cope well enough nowadays with pupils changing schools every now and again.
What annoys me most is that people who don't move around the world as we do always make a big thing about moving schools being detrimental to one's education and interfering with the ability to form lasting relationships. But, well, there's more than one way of being educated, and I've yet to hear any hard evidence of travel affecting one's connection with other people.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But like I say, in this day and age, I don't see why it should be such a big deal. Plenty would probably argue that it's even a good thing getting to meet new people and seeing new things. Anyway, I'm more interested to know which of the places you've been to has impressed you the most.
Oh, everywhere has been pretty good. The place before this was Botswana, which was really interesting. I had a great time at school there. I loved the outdoors too, so that was good. From the Kalahari Desert to the Okavango swamps. Awesome!
I'm sure a lot of you love eating all those unusual dishes that form part of any trip to an exotic location. For example, you can try snake in China, or you can gobble up insects like fried beetles in Thailand or grasshoppers in Mexico. But did you know that some of these strange foods can actually be dangerous for you? For example, Jamaica's national fruit, the ackee, has to be fully ripe before you eat it, and its black seeds are toxic and bad for the blood, so are perhaps best avoided altogether. Likewise, in Brazil, many people like cassava, also known as tapioca. But when you eat this root vegetable, make sure to peel and cook it thoroughly. Raw, it is poisonous. You can die. And one of the creepiest dangerous foods is sanakji from Korea. In case you're wondering, this is raw baby octopus. The thing is alive even when you chop off its tentacles. They carry on moving and can even stick to your mouth and throat so that you choke. So if you must eat this, make sure to chew before swallowing. But did you know that you don't need to travel to encounter potentially dangerous foods? For example, you might not think twice about reaching for a few nuts when someone hands out a bowl of cashews. But did you know that raw cashews, the ones you buy in the shops, are not raw but have been steamed to have a poisonous chemical taken out, are really bad for your stomach? So don't eat cashews unless you're absolutely sure of the source. Yes, that innocent-looking nut can be fatal. You have been warned.
Speaker 1.
I had never tried oysters before, but I was on vacation on the east coast of the U.S., and they're everywhere. You can even pick them up at street stalls. Anyway, I plucked up the courage and took my first taste, and actually, I quite liked it. Well, to tell the truth, it was a bit bland. So I tried another, but this time with Tabasco sauce to give it a bit more kick. It certainly worked, but within minutes, I started feeling really awful. I mean, really ill. My mouth felt as if it was on fire, but it wasn't just the hot sauce. I think those oysters were probably off or old. Anyway, it was enough to put me off oysters forever. And I'll certainly think twice before eating street food again.
Speaker 2.
I'm Mexican, so, I was brought up on tacos. Now I'm living in the UK, and it's hard to find them, at least decent ones. But the other day, a friend recommended this takeaway place. I had a feeling ahead of time that it wouldn't be any good, but they still managed to disappoint. The tacos were downright unpleasant. The corn tortillas weren't fresh, and the salsa was all sweet and sticky like tomato ketchup, and worst of all, it wasn't spicy at all. Plus, the meat seemed to be old. It was all stringy and tasted weird. I picked at them for a while, but they were so bad I couldn't finish them. It made me realize how difficult it is to recreate the true flavors of our cuisine abroad. It's down to the scarcity of authentic ingredients, I guess. This was more like Tex-Mex cuisine, really. It was pretty painful when the bill came and I had to pay up. I should have known better.
Speaker 3.
I have rather conventional tastes, I suppose. I'm not ashamed to admit that burgers are my favourite takeaway food, and I'm not fussy about where I go either. I'll eat any kind of burger. But, it costs a fortune to dine out all the time, so I thought I'd have a go at preparing some burgers for me and my mates at home. Well, it was an absolute disaster. You'd think it would be a fairly simple thing, but I managed to mess it up completely. The burgers were tough, the onions burnt, and the bread rolls were stale, so we ended up having to throw the whole lot out. I was really disappointed. I think I'll go back to eating out in future.
Speaker 4.
They say it's going out of fashion, but I still love fish and chips. It's a uniquely British dining experience. There's nothing like it when you can't be bothered to cook and you want something quick. Trouble is, some places are good, the fish is tasty and the chips are crispy, but in other places, everything is really greasy and soggy. The other day, I went to my local chippy to get a takeaway, and I found that the place had changed hands. I ordered my usual anyway, but it just wasn't the same. I think they must have used old oil or something because everything was really stodgy and tasted horrible. It's disappointing when you're imagining one taste and you get another one, which is nowhere near as nice. But I guess even the best places end up going downhill sometimes.
Speaker 5.
There's this really nice stall where we go to get crepes, but it's so popular, you usually have to line up right around the corner. Even so, people carry on going. I regularly go there with my friends. We really like the sweet ones with cream, melted chocolate, banana, and so on. Anyway, trouble is, I'm on this diet now, so I'm cutting back on sugar, and I wanted a savory one with just low-fat cheese and fresh spinach. And I asked for mine to be made without butter, and the guy who makes them went nuts and was really rude about it. He said he couldn't do it with that number of people waiting. I was shocked. It wasn't so much to ask, especially as we're always there.
Speaker 1.
When I left college, I got an office job, and now I'm pretty much sitting at a desk all day. So I joined a local gym and began to feel much fitter, but I started to get bored of the routine. Then I heard about the Free Swimming Society that encourages people to get back to the joy of swimming under an open sky, as they say. Well, I grew up in a village, and as kids we used to swim in the local river, so I decided to join. And now I'm a regular wild swimmer. Swimming is fantastic exercise, but the best thing is connecting with nature again. It makes you feel so energised and joyful.
Speaker 2.
I've always been a sporty person and I'm quite attracted to extreme sports. I'd done traditional parachute jumping, but I felt I wanted to push myself and try something that was potentially more risky. So I decided to move on to skydiving. That's when you go into freefall before opening the parachute. The first time was probably the most nerve-wracking experience I've ever had. We went up to 10,000 feet before the instructor opened the plane door, but then it felt so good in freefall. I enjoyed it so much I started training for my license. It's expensive, but it's worth every penny for the sheer exhilaration. It's the ultimate high. Everyone should try it.
Speaker 3.
When I was growing up, girls weren't expected to play football, but I used to kick a ball around with my brothers and I fell in love with the game. They inspired me to join the school team. Being a young female footballer was tough and I got lots of sarcastic comments from the boys. It was the 2012 Olympic Games in London that really altered people's preconceptions about women's football. Before, I never told people I was a footballer. Now, I love saying it. Playing football professionally involves sacrifice, but you can't imagine how great you feel when you've played really well and you win. I'd encourage more girls to believe football is something for them to enjoy.
Speaker 4.
I decided to take up running to get fit, and I enjoyed it. But if you're just running for the sake of it, it's easy to get discouraged and give up. I felt having a goal to work towards would help, so I decided I would run the London Marathon and fundraise for charity. I got a charity place for a children's organisation, and that encouraged me to continue my training, even when the weather was awful. On race day, you're part of a team, and there's a great sense of comradeship. What's truly rewarding when you run for charity is knowing you're helping real people and changing lives. Now, I'm training for my 4th marathon.
Speaker 5.
When I was 16, I developed back problems, which meant I couldn't take part in sports or physical activities at school, and I started to feel quite depressed. The physiotherapist recommended taking up yoga classes to help strengthen my back muscles. With a good teacher, yoga is a safe way to increase physical activity, and doing it regularly helps you get in tune with your body and develop your physical strength. But it doesn't just boost your physical well-being. When I started, I just wanted to get stronger, but actually, it's helped me to learn more about myself and my feelings, and as a result, I've achieved a much more positive outlook on life. It changed my life.